Man, I love 80s anime. I also love 80s movies. What happens when you combine the two? You get Riding Bean. Riding Bean is a one-episode OVA about Bean Bandit, or the Road Buster as he's also called. For $45,000, he'll take any car-related job from transporting to being a getaway driver. The OVA opens up with Bean as the getaway driver, waiting on these group of robbers. After very clumsily shooting a cop and briefly taking a naked woman hostage, they get to Bean's car, but the cops are already on their asses. As they're driving, a large van ends up blocking the road. Despite the setback, Bean's car is able to turn his wheels 90 degrees and drive sideways over a gate while the cop cars end up crashing straight into the van. Bean ends up losing the cops while one of the robbers takes off their mask, revealing that they're a little girl. Not only that, but because Bean ended up taking this direction, the car ended up getting caught on camera, with the little girl's face being shown. After losing the cops, they get to a place to divvy out the cash. Bean takes his $45,000 cut, but his accomplice isn't too happy about it. He tries to offer Bean another job, but Bean refuses, saying he doesn't work with amateurs, especially ones who use kids to do their dirty work. As Bean leaves, we see the robbers aren't who they say they are, the little girl pulling off her face mask to reveal a completely different face and hair, and the man actually being a woman. We cut to the next morning where we see a woman getting ready for the day. Her name is Rally. She is a sharpshooter and is also Bean's working partner. She calls out for Bean, but he's still sleeping. She tries using her taser to wake him up, but it does no good. So she does what any sensible person would do. Push the frying pan of eggs on his face. Oof. Bean sure isn't going to be sunny side up today. Bean complains about Rally's wake-up technique, while she complains about how few jobs they've been getting. As they're talking, a man comes knocking on their door, begging for help for a delivery request. With some suspicion, they let them in, seeing a man and a little girl who looks very similar to the one that was with Bean last night. Meanwhile, at the police station, Lieutenant Percy is waxing his car when his colleague comes over to tell him that the chief wants him. Percy has been trying to catch Bean, but has failed so many times. However, his GT500 Cobra might finally be able to catch him. Percy visits the chief and tells him he's off the Bean Bandit case. The daughter of the president of the Grimwood Company, Chelsea Grimwood, has been kidnapped, and he wants Percy on the case to find her, much to his dismay. We cut back to Bean's office and Mr. Morris explains the situation. Morris explains he used to work at the Grimwood mansion as a guard, and he rescued Chelsea from some kidnappers and needs help getting her back to the mansion. Bean asks him how he knows about the office. Morris tells him that Grimwood Financial has an intelligence agency and knows quite a bit about Bean. Rally verifies it over the police scanner, so Bean says he'll do it for $50,000. But just as it's happening, the office gets shot up and Mr. Morris is shot dead, while Rally ducked for cover. Bean meanwhile got shot and riddled with bullets, but he's fine. Dude's made of fucking iron or something. Chelsea is also fine because Bean kicked the chair in front of her right as they started firing. So Bean and Rally get in the car and take Chelsea to the mansion, but notice that the guy that shot up the place didn't try to re-kidnap her. Although they also suspect that it could just have been some guys that they pissed off in the past. It's still odd. Although they also suspect it could just be some guys they pissed off in the past. It's still just odd. We cut to Bean's place and discover that Mr. Morris is not only still alive and that he faked his death, but he's also the same woman from the previous night that pretended to be a guy. Then we cut to the police station where we see Chelsea in the back of Bean's car from the police footage that was caught on camera from the night before. It's clear now that she framed Bean for the kidnapping, and now the cops are on his tail. We cut to the real kidnapper's place where Mr. Grimwood is being held captive by the little girl from before. Her name is Carrie and she's taking care of Grimwood while Summerlin is away. He asks what her relationship with Summerlin is and she tells him that she's her lover. Ugh, gross. Ugh, pedophile. Ugh, get out of there, girl. Grimwood tries to trick her into letting him leave, but she's too crafty. She tries to suck his dick, but thankfully he stops her before anything can happen. So she pulls out a knife, threatening to cut it off instead. However, Summerlin interrupts them and assaults her for being too nice to Mr. Grimwood. Grimwood begs her to stop as she starts crying. She relents and kisses her on the lips. Grimwood calls her out on this, but Summerlin reminds Grimwood that he's their hostage. He asks her where his daughter is, and she tells him that she left her with Bean, and is probably back at the mansion, and now it'll be easy for them to get away while Bean's being chased by the cops. We then cut to the gate of the mansion. Bean tries to get in, but the gatekeeper is having trouble buying his story, saying a guy who used to work there as a guard, but he gets buzzed in anyway. Of course it ends up being a trap, locking them in the mansion entrance. Bean tries to explain that he came here at the request of a Chelsea Grimwood they rescued from a group of kidnappers. They tell Bean to get out of the car to prove that they are who they say they are. Bean plays a testimonial tape from Morris in hopes that it will prove who they are. Meanwhile, the police find out that Bean's at the Grimwood estate and rush over there. Unfortunately, the guards don't buy Bean's story and say that there never was a guy named Morris that worked there. He then asks where the chairman and the money is, but Bean is dumbfounded. He explains Mr. Grimwood took $2 million to make a trade for his daughter, but Bean doesn't know anything about that. He then tells Bean to get out of his piece of shit car and spits on it. This angers Bean so much that Riley puts on her seatbelt, while Bean stuffs a bunch of nuts in his mouth and breaks them with such force his glasses fall off. He then starts his car and sideways drives the guy into a tree. They then drive past the bars, keeping them in. Bean's driving actually wakes Chelsea up and she starts screaming. They try to let her out, but the guards have anti-tank rifles, so it's a no-go. So Bean drives backwards out towards the gate where he happens to run into Percy. Percy tells Bean how low he's gone resorting to kidnapping children, which Bean immediately questions what the hell he's talking about. He shows Bean the report, but Bean tells him it's bullshit and tells Percy that if he lets Chelsea out he's going to be shot at, so he drives off. Meanwhile, Summerlin and her gang are off to the airport, but stop by a gas station for food and gas. This same gas station that Bean just happens to be at, trying to lay low. They explain to Chelsea that they didn't kidnap her, but are actually trying to return her home, but things got messy so they had to bail. Bean orders them all food, and they discover through the police report that they have been framed, and that the girl in the photo could not have been Chelsea. They come to the conclusion that the kidnappers have got to be the guys Bean was with the other night. What's more is Chelsea doesn't know any guards named Morris. Bean's associate, the Fixer, calls Bean to tell him that there weren't any dead bodies in his office either. So Bean comes to the conclusion that the guy probably played dead and split. Bean and Riley also realize that the kidnappers had a $2 million payoff, so Bean and Riley try to figure out how to find them. She then asks Bean how exactly he got caught on camera. Bean explains that a big 18-wheeler was blocking the road, which caused him to go onto another road where a camera took his picture. Riley comes to the conclusion that the gang members must have blocked the road, so he would have gotten caught, thus being framed. As they're talking, the same truck passes them, and Bean realizes it's them. Riley shoots the driver, causing Summerlin to take over the wheel. Bean and Riley give them chase, and we get an epic chase scene. Bean tries to hop onto the truck, but they chuck grenades at them, causing them to slow down, but they keep on their tail. Summerlin then deliberately goes down an unfinished bridge, shoots her partner Rick cold-bloodedly, and takes Carrie, the gang member, and Mr. Grimwood in the car in the back of the van and drive out of it. Bean and Riley almost careen off the bridge, but thankfully Bean's rims extend themselves into the pavement to stop the car. Summerlin sees them survive and tries to get away, but Bean is still on them. However, the cops have also caught up to Bean, with Percy trying to ram Bean, but Bean hits him back and causes him to crash his car. Eventually, Bean chases Summerlin down to a parking garage. Bean tells Riley to stay with Chelsea while he goes after Summerlin. He discovers her little walkie-talkie, trying to goad Bean into working for her for $500,000. Of course, Bean blows her off and tells her to give him the hostage and the $2 million and their lives. He cuts her walkie-talkie in half and causes an extremely loud noise in her ears, which alerts Bean to her location. He chucks his knife at her door, and he breaks the door off with his bare hands. Jesus! She unloads her clip into Bean, but it does nothing to him, and runs off. Meanwhile, Chelsea ends up getting taken captive by Summerlin's other goon, and orders Riley to drop her gun. Summerlin keeps trying to bargain with Bean, but with no success. Carrie tries to get Bean to stop by telling him where the money is, so Summerlin takes her hostage and threatens to kill her if Bean doesn't drop his knife. So he drops his knife and she shoots him in the head. However, Bean is still alive. With one last attempt, Summerlin tries to ram Bean with her car, but Bean is still fine, and he lifts up the car and throws it. We cut back to Riley as she's throwing her gun. The goon catches it but notices it's just the clip, and Riley shoots him in the head with one bullet in the chamber, killing him. Carrie pleads with Bean and tells him where the money is at, so Summerlin tries to shoot Carrie, but due to the amount of gas pouring out of the car, she only grazes Carrie, and ends up triggering an explosion, killing her instead. With that, Bean and Riley reunite Mr. Grimwood and Chelsea. As Bean and Riley get ready to leave, they see Carrie. He offers her a ride out of there. Upset that Summerlin is dead, she tries to shoot Bean, but Bean tells her that she knows he didn't kill her. The explosion did, and that she tried to kill her instead. She breaks down and puts down the gun and climbs into the car, Riley noting that Bean has a way with kids. With that, they leave, off to avoid the cops and head on to the next adventure. So Riding Bean is one excellent OVA. It has cool car chases, action scenes that are all baked into one perfect OVA. I really dig its characters. Bean is a rough, tough guy who really cares about his car, but he also has a lighter side around kids. Rally is a level-headed sharpshooter who can dish it out just as well as Bean can. She's also able to cool him down when he starts getting too crazy. Summerlin is just a great villain you can fucking hate. On top of being a kidnapper, she's also a pedophile using Carrie to do her dirty work. Carrie's also a good minor antagonist, trying so hard to catch Bean but always fucks up in one way or another. Writing Bean was directed by Yasuo Hasegawa and written by Kenichi Sonata. Sonata also wrote a 4-chapter Writing Bean manga that sadly ended due to the magazine's cancellation. Sonata is famous mainly for his character designs in Bubblegum Crisis, Gale Force, and many others. His designs are what I picture in my mind when I think of 80s anime. Now earlier when I said this OVA is like if you combined 80s movies with 80s anime, let's just say I couldn't stop thinking about how this felt like an animated The Blues Brothers movie with the amount of car crashes in the film. Sonata himself has said the Blues Brothers was a huge inspiration for creating Writing Bean. It's no coincidence that both works take place in Chicago. Yes, this OVA takes place in America, and honestly I think that's really cool. It was also scored by an American band, David Garfield and Friends, and let me tell you, this score is phenomenal. Its jazzy score fits the Chicago setting perfectly that you'll be listening to the soundtrack once you finish the OVA. I'd show you some of the music right now, but this video will probably get taken down then. The Writing Bean OVA was meant to be a pilot for a full TV series that sadly never got made. However, this wouldn't be the end of Writing Bean. See, the character of Raleigh would later get fine-tuned by Sonata years later, into a manga and OVA series of its own called Gunsmith Cats. Which yes, I'll probably do a review on that one day. As for Bean Bandit, well this OVA won't be the end of him either. But that's a story for another day.